Hello and welcome to the latest Designer Studios, a series in which we find out a little bit more about some of the spaces and places where creatives do their very best work. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Twigg, who is co-founder and managing director of design and architecture practice Forme UK. A very warm welcome to you, Mark.
Thank you for asking me. I'm most delighted to join you.
Well, I wanted to start off, if we may, just with a little bit of background. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the firm, for those who are not familiar with it, and stuff like where you started, where you're based.
Okay, certainly. Well, Forme UK was formed, excuse the little pun there, was formed in 2001, November 2001. We were 4 partners originally, good friends, good colleagues, and we were basically, we headed up a major interior design team in a major practice in North London. And we felt that our creative way was maybe a slightly different one. So we decided to set up Forme UK in the middle of what actually was a recession. So it wasn't actually the right time to do it, but when is the right time? Sure. So we did that, and the business excelled. We've been going for 20 years now. We're a team of 8 core in a studio based down in Shad Thames, just by the river. So lovely studio, little underutilized at the minute, I have to say. But yes, that's a little bit about us. And the type of work we do is very varied. So we do commercial office design, strategic space planning, hotel design, leisure design, government design. A lot of our work over the years has been for the British Foreign Office, for doing British embassies all over the world. And so, yeah, quite a mix and quite a mixed team as a result.
Now, as I understand it, your kind of working setup was a little different even before the pandemic. I mean, how's the working structure operated for you and your team, I guess, before all of COVID hit and since?
Well, ironically, just before, a couple of years before COVID, we were reviewing the amount of office space that we rented. And we were reviewing the way that we work, because as designers, the design muse can ascend upon you anywhere. It doesn't necessarily need to be around a desk in a studio. So I had been actively looking for a much smaller studio space to become the Forme UK a creative hub, really, so that we could go into the studio, have a space that we really wanted to go into, a destination space. Mm-hmm. That we could go in and create and collaborate and socialize and do all the fun bits of that offices bring, but then go back home and do the production work. And we really were just about to push the button on this. I found a little space in our same building, half the size, and we were about to go, and COVID hit. So all the plans went on hold, and technology sort of forced itself upon us, and we ended up doing what we were intending to do anyway, in a slightly roundabout way, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that was just a peculiar.
So how many people are in the team? I mean, say before, when you were working in the sort of studio in the office before, how was it sort of?
We're 8 core. We've always been 8 core. The Forme core, the special 8 who formed the core of Forme UK, and then we would tend to freelance out particular projects or particular jobs to come in and join the team. So yeah, we've always been about 8. With the partners, it was 12 for now 10, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've always done it that way. So working from home wasn't that big a challenge for us, to be honest. Mm. The only challenge I would say has been when we won new projects during the pandemic, we found it impossible to create online like this. We had to go into the studio, socially distance, sit down there and work together as a team, get the ideas together, and then go back home and produce the information for the next meeting. That was imperative for us.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to ask you is how, from working remotely, we've all had to adapt to that, in all different areas of the industry. But how have you maintained that sort of sense of collaboration? Because that can be quite important, both with the client and within the team, can't it?
Yeah, I suppose I've sort of answered that question a little bit, but yeah, the way we maintain collaboration and the way we moderated that is by, obviously, we talk every Monday. We have a Monday meeting every morning on Zoom. We then have individual project meetings after that. So we don't bore everybody in the studio about every single project. But on a collaborative level, a creative collaborative level, we go into the studio. We sit down together, we gather around together, we socially distance at the minute, obviously, but we look at the materials, we look at the fabrics, the finishes, the various elements that we need are required for our interiors, and just make some decisions in the studio together, for much more tactile experience. And then we go back home and produce the information. And you tend to get an awful lot more done when you're thinking about a detail for a project, for example. Once you know your direction, your creative direction, you can produce a lot more. So that's how we do it, and that's actually how I foresee us doing it going forward.
Yeah, because that's an interesting point actually in terms of where we go from here, because there's a lot of debate at the moment about whether certain industries, certain companies will revert back to business as usual, based in the office, or whether it's changed for good. I mean, from your point of view, you were going in a different direction anyway. Do you think more broadly people will sort of
very much
maintain where we're at the moment a little bit more?
Certainly in the office design sector, we've actually been working with some new clients during the pandemic, and they've been thinking exactly that, what their office is going to look like in the future. And what we're finding is that there's definitely a reduction in space that people are letting from agents and from developers, and they're really considering how the space works, what zones there'll be. There'll be quiet zones, there'll be live zones, there'll be we've even been thinking about hoteling, so you can actually go in and spend the night in the studio if you're coming in, say, twice a week, and you want to go out to, say, enjoy Clerkenwell Design Week or whatever. Have potentially some hoteling space in the office. So there are various types of zones that they've been thinking about and that we've been thinking about that weren't around pre-COVID. So yeah, I think the office landscape is going to be a very different place going forward in the next few years.
Right, it's interesting times. Hard to predict as well for a lot of us, isn't it?
Very, very hard to predict. We're actually doing a piece at the minute on what the office of the future will look like. So watch this space.
Yeah, keep us posted. I wanted to ask, obviously, one of the other things that often occurs to me from a point of view of people who are working from home rather than being in the office. Over the years, in various offices I've worked in, we've had great resources of back issues of magazines and other kind of resources for helping the creative ideas flow, if you like. What sources of inspiration do you and the team use? Presumably it's sort of changing from the fact that you're not based in one location. So does that mean things like...
No, I don't think it's actually affected that much. Obviously, we look online for inspiration, but generally speaking, we look at magazines like yours. We'd look at Pinterest, Instagram, the usual stuff, and internet generally. But what inspires us mainly actually is the brief. The client brief is usually very, very different. And we're a design studio that doesn't... we don't deliver the same design for every project. Every project's individual. So when we get a brief from a client and we get a discussion perhaps with if it's a developer, for example, we would speak to their letting agents, and we get a lot of inspiration from those guys as well, saying, well, this is what's on form. This is what the market is saying at the minute. You need to be providing this sort of space. And we say, well, we react to that and respond to that, and that's sort of part of our inspiration as well, really. Yeah,
so I suppose with no two projects the same, it's hard to have kind of core reference points because you're coming to it fresh. The idea is presumably
there's no house style at Forme. There never has been, and that's what we pride ourselves upon. And we develop schemes that are very different, even for the same client. We're working with a couple of developers on doing some quite large schemes, totally different designs for each project.
Right.
So they don't instill a house style. They don't want a house style. They want every building to react to the brief for the building.
Sure, and it keeps it more interesting as well, apart from anything else.
Sure does. Well, of course, this particular developer's got buildings all around London, in various parts of London, in Mayfair, in Soho, and that dynamic in each of those areas is quite different. The perceived tenant is very different, and going forward, it's going to be even more different, because I reckon you'll see a lot more multi-tenancies going forward as well.
Right.
Rather than the big let for the whole building, they're looking at a lot more multi-tenancies and a lot more communal areas to provide the facilities that will entice people to go into the studio or to the office. Right. That's going to be key. You're going to be some really cool stuff happening, I think.
Oh, it's going to be good for us as well from the magazine's point of view.
There are already some terrific product coming out that responds to COVID. Whether it meant to or not, I'm not sure, but it does seem to fit the bill.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, talking of products and technology, I wanted to get a bit of a sense of how you guys bring some of your ideas to reality, the tools and the technology that you use. I mean, I'm assuming that was already well on the way with some of the technology shifts maybe in the last couple of years. What would you say you can't sort of do without in terms of technology and tools?
I'm essentially old school here, but I couldn't do without a pen and paper.
It's always good to hear.
I just couldn't. And I've watched some of the younger designers actually designing on screen, and I can't fathom how that's done. I'm art school taught, so we were always taught, to draw and let the paper react to what you're drawing and get the inspiration from that process. And I find it's dead to me doing it on a screen. But so for me personally, I couldn't go without a pen and paper. And probably not good old-fashioned AutoCAD. That's still prevalent. We are Revit practice, although as an interior design practice, it's quite unusual for the tenants to have left the building before we start our design. So you don't often have cloud point data available to do a Revit model from the beginning. Often we've done the scheme before the tenants even moved out, so we can't even start that Revit model. Although we have done loads of projects in Revit. It's a little bit less usual when you're working with a developer. We tend to work mainly with developers at the minute.
Right. Okay. I suppose it's a difficult. I was going to ask you what would you change about your workplace? If you could enhance something or change the physical sort of space that you work in. But I suppose that's quite a difficult one to answer, given that you've already undergone a big shift in the way that you work. So it's less about one single space now, isn't it, for you?
It's about one single space, but if you ask me what I could lose, I'd probably lose half of it. I'd go into a smaller space and make that space work a lot harder for me, with much more flexible, being able to move the space around to different configurations. Right. For for meeting space, for a lecture type experience, for breakout, for party time, bar time, socializing time, and actually maybe some work in there too.
It's a small matter of some work.
But it's all about work. All of those scenarios I mentioned are all about work. You're working in every single one of those scenarios, and you're discussing work, and work is the core that runs through all of it. So yeah, I would make the space smaller. So
versatile, flexible, but smaller.
Versatile, flexible and smaller. Yeah, for us, that's what suits us.
Yeah, sure.
I think some larger companies out there will be thinking the same way.
Yeah, without doubt. Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask. I always throw this one in just at the end. On a scale of 1 to 10, how tidy typically is your own desk?
Desktop or desk?
I mean your physical desk rather than your computer desktop.
Well, this is sort of my home from home here, and I would say this is about a 7. This is quite good.
Oh, good. That's impressive.
But my desktop, my Windows desktop, that's a whole different story.
Well, I scored low on both counts, so I'm not going to criticise, rest assured. But now listen, Mark, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been really good to chat, and we appreciate you giving some insight into your design studio.
You're most welcome. We were a slight oddity in the studio in that we are hotel, leisure, workplace, and government workplace. We're quite a mix. So for these new type of environments that are coming up, the new collaborative spaces, we're well placed to do those because we've got that experience on both sides of the fence.
Sure.
So yeah, and we're doing augmented reality too. That's another thing I didn't talk to you about, but yeah,
loads going on. Well, perhaps that's something we can talk about.
It's becoming a requirement really when you have a space you're trying to let to tenants. We're not designing just one interior. We're designing 4 for different types of tenant profile. So medical, banking, commercial, a variety of types of space. We're designing, you press a button, you go in and say, well, that's what it looks like as a medical space. That's what it looks like as a creative space. That's what it looks like as a good old-fashioned office space. And they can see that through the headset standing in the space. So it's an interesting development this last year.
Yeah, I sense we'll be speaking again before too long about some of those things. So
okay, well, you must well just give me a shout.
Let's keep in touch. Yeah, and I would add also to everyone watching, thanks very much for watching. I hope you'll join us again soon for the next Designer Studios at designerarty.co.uk. In the meantime, bye for now.